Hey, keep your hands where we can see them. Hands on the steering wheel.
Is that what you're coming over here for?
Yeah, that's why we're coming over here, okay?
I'm suspicious, huh?
No, because he called saying that...
I don't care what he calls for. He's following me.
Drew Breezy. Drew, what's going on in the news and how are you?
Have we got a show for you tonight? It's a case that you and I have been preparing for months and months. It has finally come to fruition, and it's a great tale of mystery. First, it's either racial profiling, or it's a miscarriage of justice by overstepping the bounds and charging a law enforcement officer with crimes that he may or may not have committed. So we're going to have a great fun time discussion. And you know what? It involves both 911 and it involves the officer response. And that's what we aim to do here on the Comm Center. We aim to let you be part of the problem. If you're watching us on YouTube, please look down at the bottom of the screen. You will see our phone number there. You can call that 7 days a week and leave a very vile voice message for John. Please do something original other than breathing heavy, as somebody has done for the past few weeks. In Pierce County, Washington, there is currently a sheriff. His name is Ed Troyer. He's been in law enforcement for, I think, 38 years, something like that. He was like an undersheriff for several years. Then his mentor retired. He became the sheriff himself. He was elected a couple of years ago. And as you know, Pacific Northwest is kind of a hotbed for very watchful eyes amongst law enforcement. What happened one night was the sheriff was in his home and noticed a car creeping around the neighborhood. So he went outside to check it to see what was going on. He observed this car driving up and down the street with its headlights out. It was going into different driveways. So he jumped into his personal car and he followed this vehicle. And at some point, there was a confrontation between the driver of the other car and the sheriff. And the driver of the other car was a black male. And instantly, the black male began to say, the only reason that you're following me is because you're a black male. And he identified him as the sheriff. He said, I know you're a cop. So he knew he was being followed by, quote, a cop. And he immediately went to this black male. I'm a black male, and that's the only reason you're stopping me, or the only reason. So what happened was, and this is where the story gets a little hazy, but the sheriff said that during that conversation, the guy said that he would take him out. The guy said that I'm going to take you out. That's what the sheriff said. The driver said. The sheriff called a non-emergency, like John, in your communication center, do you have kind of like a law enforcement only line so that, you know, cops on the street or firefighters or whatever can get an admin, get something done quickly without having to sit and wait on a non-emergency line?
They do, because of the way that it used to work, where all the independent cities in my county all had an individual phone number for their police department. When we went to an integrated 911 system back in the 90s, all those phone numbers ended up bringing into the same place. So now there's all these phone numbers that still exist, but don't really get advertised to the public. So yeah, they'll use those sometimes.
Where I work, we have a non-recorded line that is used. It rings right at the supervisor's desk. It has so many uses, and it's not. Look, everybody uses it. I mean, cops. There are administrative lines that you call that the public doesn't have access to, because when you work in an agency the size of the one that I worked in, you know, there's 3,500 employees. There's about, I don't know, 1,500 give or take on the street. Obviously not all at once, but there's 5 different districts going on. There's a lot of stuff going on, even on the midnight shift. So you don't want to sit and wait on the non-emergency line, especially if it's a call request to like, hey, patch me through to this other phone number, or hey, can you do me a favor and get EMS rolling to this thing, you know, and they don't want to get on the radio and say it. So there are these administrative lines. So the sheriff called this administrative line. Curiously, the media out there keeps calling it a backdoor 911. They continually over and over keep calling this the backdoor 911 because they certainly want to paint the picture that he called an emergency line. And this is simply not true. Let me find the phone call. Let's play exactly what the sheriff said so you can hear. The call was put into the system by one person. And essentially, they took what the sheriff said and morphed it into the sheriff is at his personal residence and he's being threatened. His life is being threatened. The sheriff specifically asked for something on the phone call. You're going to hear it in a second. What naturally happened was there was an overwhelming police response, and that got a lot of attention naturally.
Radio. Hey, it's Troyer.
Okay, right off the bat, I'm going to stop it. Notice he answers the phone, radio. Or, he doesn't say 911, what's your emergency? Or, Bay Area 911 Center, can I help you? Or he says radio because it's a familiar line that people use. Okay. Just bear that in mind.
Radio. Hey, it's Troyer.
What can I do for you?
I'm at 27th and Deidre in Tacoma in North End. About 2 blocks from my house, and I caught someone in my driveway who's just threatened to kill me, and they blocked him in. He's here right now.
Okay. Go again with your address.
Well, my address is...
Okay.
And he's in some sort of gray car, and he was in my driveway, in my neighbor's driveway, and he knows who I am, and he threatened to kill me, and I got him blocked in at 27th and Deidre. I think his plate is... I really need just 1 or 2 people here first.
Absolutely, I'm getting the call right now.
Hang on, he's not going to let me leave.
Okay, does he have a gun or anything?
I have no idea. He looks homeless in his car, but he was in my driveway, and I got my car, and he was in my neighbor's driveway, tried to get my garage.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I got him blocked in. I'm in a white Tahoe.
Okay.
My own personal white Tahoe. He's taking pictures and video on me.
Okay. I've got units headed your way.
I just need 1 or 2 here quick. He was in my neighbor's houses and climbing. Sorry, but...
No, you're good.
Going on. I think they found me. All right.
Okay, stay on the phone with me, though, okay? Just so I can make sure.
I don't want to hang up. I'm trying to back up and let him go, but he blocked me in.
Okay. And what kind of car is he in?
I don't know, some sort of beat up, charcoal, homeless looking Scion. I gave you the plate number.
Yeah.
Black number. I tried to be polite to him, and he just says I'm a racist and wants to kill me. So,
okay.
I don't want anything other than him to let me go home, which is 2 blocks away, which I just came out of my house.
Anybody else with him, Chief?
No. I'm not mad at him or anything, but he's...
Okay.
I think he might have one of those garage door openers because he pulled into 4 or 5 different houses around my neighborhood and tried to hit the garage door opener button.
Yeah.
My house is... I'm doing a remodel, so there's so much room, and there's no room in the driveway, so he tried it everywhere else. So he's looking for me.
Okay.
I'm still here. I'm backing up. He's pushing against my car, so I'm just backing up. 27 D.
Okay, they should be there shortly, too.
Deidre. So weird. It's like one of those bold radio stare downs. He's just staring at me with headlights on. And,
okay.
I'm glad we're a couple blocks from my house. My wife said would kill me if they saw this. All right.
Yikes. Did you hear the officers?
No, I don't hear anything.
Don't
it's
hear
a
me?
weird
Okay.
road off 29th and Bisbee, 2 blocks above my house.
Okay.
No. He's taking video and pictures of me. It's just him alone. It's so weird.
Okay. Did he give you his name or anything?
No, he just said that I was home and saw the lights coming in on out and everything. I looked and he was like pulling in all the driveways. And I thought maybe it was one of those guys that's like kind of a thief that has a garage door opener.
Yeah.
And so I went out and followed him, and he blocked me off and accosted me and said, "You're a cop," and started threatening me, which is not a big deal, but it's part of our deal now, right?
Apparently,
so
yeah.
And he literally blocked me in. And here comes the first guy.
Okay.
Go right behind me.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so the first cop is right there. Yeah. So, okay.
Okay, well, if they're with you, I'll let you go, okay?
Thank you. Tacoma's
You
here.
betcha. Okay, great.
All right.
Okay, so he ends with "Thank you, Tacoma's here," meaning the Tacoma Police Department is here. And we have the full body. I just have a few questions, and all of this is in hindsight, of course. But did the sheriff seem excited?
No, I think he was, he wanted the engagement to end. At one point, he said, like, I'm trying to let him leave, and he's blocking me in. The guy obviously knew who he was. You know, he's an elected official, and it seemed like he was trying to pick a fight. I wasn't there, but that's just how it sounded.
Okay, right. One, let me say this. I loved patrolling at night when I was a young deputy. I loved patrolling at night as a young supervisor, and I pretty much ended my career towards the end of my career. After I left the comm center, I went back onto the midnight shift, and I loved every second of that because it's easy to detect the stimulus, the change in the environment. So if you, by pattern, patrol an area, and I had a whole district to patrol because, you know, that was my responsibility. Obviously, there was a bunch of deputies out there, you know, that had their areas to manage, but I would drive in certain areas, especially when I was led by the detective areas, or, you know, where are we getting hit with the burglaries and blah, blah. And it's sometimes very easy to detect when something's out of place or when something's changed. And if you've been through the area a million times. And I think it's very reasonable that when you look out your window and you see a car driving up and down the road with the lights out, you probably want to investigate whether you're the sheriff or a day one patrol officer.
Reasonable suspicion. It's good enough to go. That's all you need.
It is. Now, I will tell you the other side of the coin. I cannot tell you how many times my adrenaline has spiked or how many, quote, burglars, end quote, I have caught in the process of breaking into cars, only to find out they were the newspaper delivery guy. Because that's when they come out. They come out at the witching hour of burglaries, like 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. That's when they pick up the newspapers, the overnight newspapers that are, you know, my dad was a pressman back home, and he would work until the wee hours of the morning. They'd get the papers out, and then the newspaper delivery people would have that. So you would have your morning paper on your doorstep by 6 a.m. That gets delivered at 3, 4, and 5 o'clock in the morning. And a lot of times those guys are driving up and down the street, creeping around, and you don't know what they're doing and you don't know what their intentions are. And that's what we had here. We had a guy who was simply delivering the newspaper, but nobody knew that. As a matter of fact, if you'll notice, the sheriff didn't mention that in his phone call because the guy never told him that. The only time they found out about that is after the officers arrived. So the reason for me asking if he seemed startled or if he's over dramatic, is that your take? Like you've heard plenty of 911, you've heard plenty of alarmed people calling. What did the sheriff sound like to you?
Like I said, just pretty calm, wanted to diffuse the situation, wanted police officers there to handle it. You know, if his beef with the sheriff is personal, the best thing to do, particularly since you're already in Tacoma PD's jurisdiction, have those guys come in and deal with it. You know, you're the sheriff, you're an elected official, but you're still a private citizen. Call the police, have them come deal with it. That way it's not on you.
Right. Now, two things to ponder for the general public. One, we had a standard operating procedure in the agency where I worked where you did not intervene in neighborhood situations. Now, I think this is a little bit more immediate. This is an exigent kind of thing where you think you have a burglar and he just followed from a safe distance and made the phone call once he was confronted. So he made it very clear in several interviews or whichever investigation he was involved in, he was not armed. He just jumped in his private car, personal car, and started following this guy to try to get a tag and be a good witness, essentially. And the guy recognized him as a cop, In the minute he recognized him as a cop, this became a racial profiling situation simply because the driver's black and he's able to make that connection. The sheriff specifically said, I didn't know if it was a man or a woman, let alone a black man or a black woman. And from one of the investigations that I read, I don't know the truthfulness of this, but apparently this guy said, you're just following me because I'm black. And the sheriff's retort was, I have several black friends and a black grandbaby. In fact, a lot of people think my wife is black, and I don't think they would be very happy with you saying that. That was supposedly his response. How this got twisted by the newspaper carrier was that he only asked him 3 questions. Are you a cop? Are you following me because I'm black? And then I can't even remember what the third question was. So one thing leads to another. We'll show the response here in a second. The bottom line is this. If you're a criminal or somebody that I've dealt with in the past and you show up at my house, I don't think that you're there to thank me.
No, and when you're the sheriff and someone shows up at your house and they know you, there's a bit of a heightened threat. I mean, certainly for any line police officer, but like I said, the sheriff is an elected official, and that means to somebody somewhere in that county, he's a controversial figure, whether he deserves to be or not. And so, if you're an elected official or certainly the administrative leave of an entire department, very well that people could have it out for you simply because of what your deputies are doing. So like if I was in the dispatch office and my sheriff called me and said there was somebody at his house, my response would be probably pretty elevated. And of course, I don't feel good about burglaries in the middle of the night anytime they happen or confrontations such as these. But, with the sheriff, he's your boss. Number one, you want to protect your own like you would any other police officer, but you do worry about him. You worry that somebody's coming after him. And as a dispatcher, it's your job to protect him. And we'll kind of see how some of that worry comes into play here.
So we have discussed in the past coding the calls properly. And there's may have been a, no pun intended, miscommunication into what exactly happened, because the sheriff made the fleeting comment that the guy's threatening my life and I had him blocked in. So when you put that in writing, this is the old argument over text, that somebody can say something completely innocuous, but you can read it in their tone over text and you're like, oh shit, they just took a shot at me. So when somebody says the sheriff is in danger and somebody is at his house threatening his life, don't you think that the cavalry is going to respond regardless of the number of people you put on that call? That's just my question. I mean, maybe it's not protocol anywhere, but do you have an opinion either way on that?
Yeah, let's suppose you handled it this way. Let's suppose you were handling it discreetly. You put it out of the radio that there is an unknown trouble call and you gave the address, and the good sheriff's deputies are going to know where the sheriff lives. And they hear that, all of a sudden they're gonna start going code, even if you have no detail, just because of the location. They don't want to be something wrong with the sheriff's wife, the sheriff's family, or the sheriff himself. They're all going to respond hot to that, and they're also all going to get on the phone and talk to each other like, "Hey, did you hear that call? Do you know what address that is? That's the sheriff's house." They're all going to invite each other to the party as well.
Right. Just from the 10,000 foot view, when the RNC came to town here in Tampa, my job was to protect the sheriff of Hillsborough County. I was like his dignitary protective detail. And I approached it as such, like, no, he's not Mitt Romney, or no, he's not whoever was running for president at the time. But we're hosting this party in Hillsborough County, though, it was in Tampa proper. They had they had the lion's share of the work. We're hosting this party in Tampa, Florida. So the world is watching. And if we can't even protect the guy who's in charge of protection for the entire county, then we're all screwed, right? So I'm saying the sheriff, he maybe shouldn't expect a different level of security. If you're a cop on the street, you better lend some credence to this. If this is your chief of police, or if this is your sheriff, whoever that criminal is, or whoever that person is that's knocking on the door that they don't know, they're taking a shot at you by proxy. They're trying to take the leader of your agency out. Until you can prove otherwise, you should probably treat it that way. Not from a use of force standpoint, of course, but when you get the call that something funky is going on, and I'm telling you, I wish I could go into this whole story about what I did one night on the midnight shift outside of one of our majors' houses. Just the way the courts flippantly, treated it. It's a book in and of itself. And by the way, I will tell you, in my position, as a detective in the criminal intelligence section, we used to get high profile cases or dignitary protective type details and stuff. And if a judge, God forbid, I once was wrapped up in an investigation for a month or so to include bodyguarding a judge who received cookies on her doorstep on Valentine's Day. I don't want to hear anything about the judicial people not pulling the fire alarm, or I've seen it enough. And I get it. I totally get it. It just seems like if anybody else does it, they're a little bit harder on them for doing it. And until it happens to you, you don't care about anybody else. So what the sheriff did was he made a phone call. It wasn't a frantic phone call. He didn't say, send me the cavalry. He didn't say any of that. He just said, this is what happened. In fact, he went out of his way to say, send me one or two cars.
Yep. Just a couple guys.
And they put the call in the system, and it went to another dispatcher, and another dispatcher was like, oh my God, somebody's at the sheriff's house. And at some point there were 40 cars apparently on the way to this thing. I don't know how they counted that, but once the initial officers arrived, though, they saw what was going on, and they de-escalated the whole thing, as in, whoa. We don't need all of this. Just one or two more. That's it. We're good. Let's listen to some of the testimony here. To tell you that there's testimony is skipping a major part of the story. What eventually happened was this guy made such a big deal of being racially profiled that Governor Jay Inslee of Washington had his attorney general do an investigation. They did a month-long investigation, and they charged the sheriff with 2 misdemeanors for filing or calling a false report of a crime to a public official. Don't quote me on the charge. But essentially, he was charged with 2 counts, 2 misdemeanors for that, for making that phone call and for having people respond because there was a prowler in his neighborhood. So he was charged, and it went through months and months and months and months of trial. Here's some of that trial.
At some point, the gentleman stopped his vehicle and got out of his car, where he confronted Mr. Troyer. He began yelling and cussing at him.
More than 40 units from different jurisdictions responded, but the call was eventually downgraded as officers learned more information. With dispatch notified, only 1 unit needed to continue. During testimony from the 911 dispatcher who initially put out the urgent call, Troyer's life may be in danger. Defense attorneys for Troyer highlighted possible issues with how the initial call was handled.
Sheriff Troyer never called 911, did he? No. Okay. He called in.
That is a dispatcher testifying.
Inside line, didn't he? Correct. So that's not for emergencies involving officers who need help, is it?
Officers use that line for that, yes.
The dispatcher becoming emotional at one point during testimony as the defense questioned her about a negative performance review regarding this case.
It's not based on any other incident or call, is it?
It's certainly not based on how I handled the call. I handled the call appropriately. The officer needs help call type is what is initially put into the computer.
Right. Do you need a minute?
Jurors heard from one of the responding officers who was first on scene the night Troyer called for help. Some of those officers.
You heard her tearful testimony. They were kind of putting her through the ringer. That was the defense, by the way, that was asking her questions. She was disciplined for something, and she was setting the record straight. Obviously, she's saying, no, I was not disciplined for how I handled the call. I handled that call correctly, and I'm glad she stood her ground. I mean, they're essentially calling her to the stand in the defense of the sheriff to say, he didn't call 911. I'm the one that sent the cavalry because that's the information that I had.
Yeah, it's first of all, no 911 dispatcher likes going to court. Anytime we have to be there, it's almost implied that that something went wrong because as a 911 dispatcher, you just don't normally go to court unless you're just there to introduce a recording that might be a matter of fact of evidence. But you'll also note if you're just listening, okay, so when the sheriff called that phone line earlier, he was talking to a guy. So that was someone else in the comm center. The female you just heard on the stand was the dispatcher who sent the units. She also described the call for service type as officer needs help. So what happens is you had this call taker open a call for service on his computer, meaning he started essentially a new case file. He typed in the address, and he put the call type as officer needs help. Now, anyone seeing that on their mobile data terminal is also going to automatically dispatch themselves. I don't know how many units she said to go, but you have to remember other people see that and they want to be a part of that too. Part of it is that they genuinely want to help, but it's kind of an opportunity to be there on what could potentially be a major case or a serious case, and they want to show their best effort for that. But somewhere along the line between the call taker hearing that only 1 or 2 units are needed on what should have been a suspicion call, disorderly conduct call, or some other kind of more minor call, it got put up as officer in danger. And of course, other accused in the call saying that this guy threatened me. He knows who I am. He threatened some kind of physical harm. You could call that officer in danger. So what do you do? Well, we've talked about on the show plenty of times where if there's any doubt, you resolve all doubt in your favor. I'm not in this situation, but on the outside looking in, and again, not being an expert on this case because it only came to my attention recently, I would do the same thing. If we had a sheriff, my sheriff, and he told me that he was in some kind of confrontation and he needed help, even if he said he only needed 1 or 2 cars, I'm probably going to send more than that. Would I, tone it out on the state channel, 1099 officer in trouble? Probably not. Cavalry probably wouldn't show up, but there would be more units there than I would put out. Now that obviously is better than undertyping and saying, well, it's just, it's a traffic hazard because the vehicle's blocking the other vehicle. And it takes a police officer from Tacoma, 20, 30 minutes to get there. So here's a case of overtyping where it ends up becoming a matter of legal discourse in a court. So I feel bad for her. She got upset. And I think anybody would in her situation. And I hope she wasn't disciplined for that because, frankly, I do the same thing.
Yeah, a few things. I don't know if she even works in the same center as the guy who took the call. So it's my understanding that she does not, but I could be completely wrong, 1. And 2, you can see her frustration because nobody really understands what the comm center does. Nobody really understands what dispatchers do or go through, and nobody bothers to ask. And that's frustration pouring out of her eyes, as in, listen, the only information I have is that this sheriff is in danger, that there's somebody at his house threatening his life. What do you want me to do with that information? Just sit on it, pretend like it's not there, excuse myself, go to the restroom, make a sandwich, and come back, sit down and reevaluate it? Or do I just err on the side of caution and deal with this pit bull fight that's going on in my stomach right now because I can't see what's happening and I have no clue what's happening? Like I can feel her frustration. I can feel she's trying to explain to the world she didn't do anything wrong. She in fact, she's giving you the exact same, she's giving him the exact same service that she would give any citizen. And the people that work in 911 or the people that are on the radio don't know. They don't have the visuals of what's going on. Everybody has the benefit of hindsight, and they don't. And John, your testament to this. You don't know what's happening out there. So yeah, you're going to pour whatever you can resource wise.
Yeah, just assuming the worst. And you talk about a pit bull fight in your stomach. You're wondering what to do. Well, if I underreact to this, what could happen? Well, someone's threatened the sheriff's life. In my view, if that's the only information you have, sheriff could die. So that's one pit bull in there. And the other one's like, well, I don't want to overreact. I don't want to look like an overreactor. Well, so what? Whatever you look like. Sometimes you're willing to do things in that moment where you're like, I'm going to err on the side of caution. I'm going to err on the side of safety. And at least if I do this stupid thing, if I do something dumb, I can say why I did it. And she can articulate that, So a whole bunch of police officers showed up. Some of them were laughing about it later. Some of them left the scene. Some of them said it was no big deal. And if she gets dinged for that, she's like, well, at least I acted in the best interest of my sheriff. And I'm not ashamed of that.
Speaking of which.
Even joking about the situation afterward. Tacoma Police Detective Chad Lawless on the stand for several hours today. He was one of the first officers who responded to the urgent call Pierce County Sheriff Ed Troyer needed help. Several officers arrived on scene in minutes, asking Troyer what happened.
Did he threaten you, or did you see him armed with any weapons? And again, he said no, but he also said it was clear that he wanted to fight.
The defense on cross-examination asking about any possible discrepancies in the report Lawless wrote on the incident compared to his testimony today and previous depositions on this.
I asked him if he was threatened, and he said no.
My question is, isn't it possible there was a miscommunication between the two of you?
I didn't misunderstand him.
Altheimer later returned to throw a newspaper in Troyer's driveway, and Lawless was called back to Troyer's home.
I thought it was not really relevant to anything. I thought that it was a little bit ridiculous that the sheriff would again call and say this. He didn't articulate any crimes or any violence.
Troyer's defense attorneys pointing out some of the officers joked about the situation afterwards.
Isn't it true that after this incident, you and Sergeant Storick laughed about it, right?
Laughed about throwing the newspaper?
Yes.
Yeah. Sergeant Storick is my friend, and we did laugh about it, yes.
Troyer's wife also taking the stand late in the day.
Tired of it all. I want it to be over.
Tired of it all? What do you mean by it all?
Just everything that's going on.
A couple things. One, I'm not impressed with that detective. I'm not impressed with the sergeant, with their demeanor and their jokes about it. I get it. I mean, I've been there, and I don't know this sheriff, and I don't know those the detective and the sergeant. I don't know anything about him. I can tell you this, though. This was a pretty serious situation. I don't think he overstepped his bounds. And as a matter of fact, if you were inconvenienced because the sheriff called you back, because what happened was they identified this guy as a newspaper carrier. So again, the hindsight has now made the picture very clear. And a few hours later, this guy returned to the sheriff's house and threw a newspaper in his yard and started screaming and ranting and raving. So now when you think about that, who has the pattern of harassment? Like, he knows where the sheriff lives now, obviously. He has come back to harass the sheriff by throwing a newspaper. And by the way, the sheriff didn't subscribe to the newspaper, so there was no need for him to be there. And the detective was called out there, and yeah, he was inconvenienced, and yeah, he thought it was, just like, oh, big baby, call me back because big bad man threw a newspaper in your yard. Well, guess what? The sheriff got charged with 2 misdemeanors by the attorney general. That's how important the details are, because what he's saying in his report is the sheriff did not say he was threatened. What the sheriff says happened was, I never denied I was threatened. I just said I didn't feel threatened. There's a big difference. There's a huge difference, especially when you're trying to prove the elements beyond a reasonable doubt that the sheriff made a false 911 call and that he was never actually threatened. He was. He said it in the 911 call. He had a confrontation with this guy. He wasn't saying, everyone come here and arrest this guy. I want to abuse my authority. He wasn't doing any of that. So what is your take?
To put it in layman's terms, okay, so threatening someone is a crime, but it doesn't only count if you are actually worried about the guy. Like, you don't get to just say, well, this is a crime because I'm actually afraid of him. Like, the sheriff has probably handled, bigger issues than this. And yes, the newspaper being thrown a couple hours later, it's an implied thing. And all it was saying is, I know where you live, and I came back, and, I'll go where I want to go. And, ultimately it's just kind of an FU for that whole thing that happened earlier. But of course, the sheriff doesn't have to be threatened by that in order to be inherently threatened. And like you said earlier with the judges on the cupcakes, like, that was nominally a nice thing that wound up getting that judge a protective detail. This guy is obviously getting a newspaper, which no one has any use for. So, Drew, what would you have done from there? Did you, this guy comes back and throws something in your yard? I take it he didn't call again. And so how did the misdemeanors come about? Like, what did we ever find out which misdemeanors there were? I know that one was filing false report, but did we ever find out the other misdemeanor?
Yeah, that's why I say the details are so important, because they're saying that he was never threatened. And as a matter of fact, that detective that you just saw, the smartass that was on the stand, is saying, no, he in fact, he went out of his way to tell me he wasn't threatened, which when you take that in totality, if he calls and says he's threatened, you have now made this false report. There is a difference there. I don't care if it's semantics or not. The threat occurred. He just didn't feel threatened by it. And what they're saying is the threat never occurred, that it's this guy's word against the sheriff's word. You know, the 28-year or 38-year lawman who used to be the public information officer for that agency and, you know, has done millions of things. And by all rights, for all you cop watchers out there, could have taken matters into his own hands and could have held him at gunpoint. And this could have been an Ahmaud Arbery case. But that's what this newspaper delivery guy wanted it to be. Because I'm going to play you just like the first 2 or 3 minutes of the body cam. You tell me who is amplifying things.
Henry 025, Boy, William, Boy, 5872. Hey, keep your hands where we can see him. Hands on the steering wheel.
Is that what you're coming over here for?
Yeah, that's why we're coming over here, okay?
I'm suspicious, huh?
No, because he called saying that...
I don't care what he calls for. He's following me.
Okay, we'll figure everything...
Talk to him. I don't need you to figure out nothing. I am working.
We will figure everything...
I am working.
Okay.
I'm a black male in a white neighborhood, and I'm working.
That has nothing to do with that.
Yeah, it does.
No.
He's following me.
Okay.
The fuck?
He's getting out of the way, okay?
Okay, he's still following me.
We will figure that out.
Yeah, get the fuck away from me. I don't care how many cops show up. He's following me. Fuck, I don't give a fuck. I know he's a fucking cop. What the fuck? You need how many cops for a fucking newspaper carrier? Oh, you guys are some badasses. I swear to God, you guys are badasses.
Okay.
Stop reaching for stuff, dude. I'm not reaching for shit.
Then don't keep your hands on the steering wheel.
My hands haven't moved off the steering wheel.
Okay, can I explain it?
No, I don't need nothing to be explained to me. I'm being followed. Okay. He called the cops. Congratulations.
Yes.
I'm coming to and from my house. Ooh, he's committing a crime. He's black.
No one's
He's
saying
black.
Okay.
He's black.
I'm going to explain.
Oh,
I'm going to explain
I'm
why
doing
we're
my
here,
fucking paper route.
Okay, I understand that. I see all the papers in your car.
Yeah,
okay?
congratulations.
He just called saying that someone threatened his life. That's why we're here, okay?
Yeah, I threatened his life because I walked up to him and asked him why he's following me.
You're not under arrest. Can you step out of the car?
I don't need to be under arrest. I don't. That's dumb.
Appreciate it.
You're gonna arrest me?
No, I'm not gonna arrest. Come sit right here, okay?
Fuck, I'm working.
Sit on the bumper.
I'm
You got any weapons on you?
No, I don't got shit on me. I'm at work.
We're gonna dispatch you, okay?
Gosh, I got a fucking knife in my car.
That's fine. I don't care about what's in the car.
To cut my straps on my newspaper.
I see where the guy's head is. Though it may be, it should never be controversial. I kind of don't give a shit what people think. I understand what he's saying. I get it. I totally get it. I'm not saying that to say that it was founded. I'm not saying that the sheriff was following him because he was black. I'm not trying to lend credence to that. I am saying that our media, our mainstream media, has driven this guy to believe that he was being followed simply because he was black, that he's not taking any responsibility for the totality of the circumstance, that he's creeping through a neighborhood at 2 a.m. He's seeing himself as the newspaper delivery driver. He's not seeing himself as the car with its lights out, driving around at 2 a.m. in a place that had been hit with package thefts previously. I get where he's coming from in a sense. And this point of the conversation right here, where he's leaning against the bumper, it, in my opinion, in my attempt would be, this is where I would put my hand on his shoulder and say, I need you to calm down. Just look at me. I'm going to be honest with you. Just calm down and we'll get this whole thing straightened out. This would be like a plea to look him in the eye, to have him look me in the eye so we can make some type of connection, have a bond, have a moment where I can get him to kind of just chill out for a second so he can start listening to what we're trying to tell him. That this is not about black. This isn't anything about any of that. This is about suspicious activity and suspicious behavior. That's it. And if he's not going to listen to that, then you got to try something else. Do you have a different take on this?
You know, what's funny about community policing and corrections is that even in a correctional environment where everyone's a convicted felon, you will still have this exact interaction where someone's up to something or they're not, but they don't want to deal with you as the authority figure, the police officer, the correctional officer, and they immediately play this card. I was a correctional officer a long time ago, before the George Floyd era and even, you know, before Ferguson and all this. But if someone wants to put you on the defensive and make you question what you're doing and make you hesitate, this is exactly how they go about it. You have to wonder, like you said, you know, putting a hand on his shoulder. He says he's got a knife in his car. He could still produce a weapon at any point. And that would be the case certainly in prison too. But the main game that he's playing is it's going on everywhere. It's going on everywhere in society. When someone is getting checked on their behavior and they don't want to, whether they're doing anything right or wrong, they just simply don't want to be under anyone else's authority. They play this card. Being a racist is the worst thing that you can be in our society. And it requires the least amount of proof. Somebody says it, and just the stigma is already attached. Doesn't even matter what the facts are, doesn't what the reality is, doesn't matter what's in your heart, doesn't matter who your family is at home. Somebody like this says something, it's on camera, they keep playing it. You're pulling me over because I'm black. You're shaking me down because I'm this person. We saw it all the time. It's just a tactic to make someone in authority hesitate, to make them want to discontinue. Honestly, it's I can remember this. I can remember inmates that I didn't want to deal with who I knew were going to play the race card on me. And it was entirely dissuasive because I had the option. I can engage them and enforce the rule and go through just a big headache, a big yelling match like what these guys are going through right now, or I can ignore it. And that's part of the game that he's playing right now. He wants to play this game that, hey, I know you don't have anything on me because I'm not doing anything wrong. So I'm going to make a big a headache for you as possible so that you leave me alone. Maybe the next time when I'm not doing anything wrong, but maybe the next time when I am. And that's the game going on. It's a big psychology game. It's to dissuade police from intervening right now in whatever's going on and to intervene in the future and dissuade police from being proactive.
I definitely take your point. I have a different understanding or a different take on it. And you have different experiences than I do. I'm seeing exactly what you're seeing. Let's be clear, because you can see how his attitude is here. And then when you watch a news clip, you know, it's when the tears are pouring out of his eyes and he's saying that he was profiled and that, you know, all of a sudden he's a victim. There is a fight or flight response in every human being. It's the way it's going to go. It's fight or flight. And this is his fight. His fight is, I'm going straight to what I've been programmed to believe, which is in America, specifically in the Pacific Northwest, I can't drive a car at night because I'm black. It's the same. I had to review a complaint on a deputy who wrote a ticket for the window tint being too dark, but the lady claimed that she was pulled over because she was black and never saw the irony. The irony was he couldn't see her in the car. That's why he pulled her over. He didn't pull her over because she's black. He couldn't see her. The tint was too dark. So yes, it is an automatic defense mechanism for a lot of people to go to. It may be disingenuous in a lot of cases. It also may be a fight or flight in some cases, in my opinion. And I don't know what this guy is exhibiting here. I'm not concerned about the knife in his car, to be honest, because he told me about it. Generally, people that are going to produce a knife are just going to produce a knife and stab you with it. So this is a moment. And listen, I'm not knocking what these officers did. One officer is just trying to take the soft, gentle approach, trying to communicate with this guy. And then you'll see what he tells him in a second. Then the other officer is just like, he's on 7 or 8. He's on high alert. And I don't know what the other circumstances were for him to be on that high alert. I'm glad somebody out there is, you know, employing the contact cover concept. But every time he projects this, you know, keep your hands on the wheel, it's just going to
it ramps him up. Yeah,
ramps him up. I can't, you know, I can't think of the proper word, but let's watch a little more of it. How about that?
Nothing, officer. What are we here for? What are we here for? Search my car. There's fucking newspapers. This is the second time this shit happened to me.
What's your first name, sir?
Fuck, Cedric, all time.
Cedric? Okay, Cedric. Okay, we just got a call saying that
I'm in danger. Ooh, that's a fucking lie. Now what happens to him? He's lying.
That's what we're here to figure out.
He's lying.
Okay.
So what happens to him?
Was there any?
What happens to a liar?
We will figure that out.
To get 4 cops here. How many cops cars are here?
Cedric.
For a newspaper carrier?
Cedric.
I don't need to talk. This don't make no fucking sense. I'm not under arrest, right?
You're not under arrest.
Okay, I can go, right?
No, you're not free to go either.
Why can't I go?
Because
I'm not under arrest. Who's a sergeant? Who's a sergeant around here?
On his way. Okay.
Thank you. Please, I'm not under arrest, right? I'm going back to work, right?
No, you're not leaving right now, but you're not under arrest. Okay. Do you want me to put you in handcuffs?
This is dumb.
Right now,
you're gonna put me in handcuffs for what?
Cedric.
I'm talking?
Right now, I'm just talking to you man to man, trying to figure out what's going on, okay?
It's not a man-to-man conversation. Go talk to him. The one's so in danger. He's in danger. I got weapons.
Cedric.
I got weapons.
You see how calm I am?
Throw a fucking newspaper at him.
You see how calm I am?
I pulled into his driveway? If I pulled into your driveway, I'm obviously your carrier.
Cedric. Just talk to me for a little bit, okay?
There's nothing to talk about.
Okay.
There's nothing to talk about.
Did you guys have any verbal altercation?
He's following me.
Okay.
I walked up to his car because he came around the block again for the third time. I approached him. Why are you following me? Okay. Because I'm a black male in a white neighborhood? Oh, where are you at? I'm on the north end. You don't know where you're at? My wife is black. I don't care.
That's all we're trying to get to is what happened between you guys that made him call
I am working. I am driving a bucket and I'm in a nice neighborhood. I'm working. I'm over here every night. I see you guys every night. Nobody messes with me. But a car that sees a bucket in the neighborhood on the wrong side of the street, throwing a paper out the fucking window, he's suspicious. Oh, he pulls up to another house. He's going to steal a fucking Amazon package off that porch. Check my car. I got 15 Amazon packages in the trunk.
Cedric, I'm not saying you're stealing anything. He's not saying you're stealing anything. He just said there was an altercation. That's why we're here. Okay?
You guys can be doing so much on that. You guys said one officer. Oh, you're following a newspaper carrier.
I'm going to be 100% honest with you. The reason there's so many cops here is because he's the sheriff who said that he got...
I know who he is. I know exactly who he is.
Someone threatened his life. We have no clue who you are.
The sheriff he's threatened?
Okay.
He's so threatened. I knew he was a fucking cop.
So
I'm over here every night, 6 days a week.
We're with Tone, please. He's not our sheriff, okay?
Thank you.
So we're threatening any sort of bond.
No! Okay. What am I threatening for? I feel threatened. I'm followed. Just because I walked up on him, I threatened him?
Did he make any threats to you?
Nobody made no threats.
Okay.
That's a lie. If I made a threat, I'll tell you, but I didn't. I didn't even go to him angry. I just wanted to know why he was following me.
Yeah, that's
simple.
So what this looks like is a big case of misunderstanding, okay? He thinks you're doing something, you think he's doing something, okay?
Because I didn't answer none of his questions, he says he's in danger. You're a sheriff. You're so in danger.
Cedric, stop, okay?
That's dumb as hell.
We pulled over so many paper delivery people because, yes, it is weird when we see them in the middle of the night going from house to house and people always call you guys in, right? You always have cops drive by you. Sometimes you get pulled over, sometimes you don't. Once you realize, oh, you're just delivering papers, let you do your job, okay? Obviously, he didn't realize that you were doing your job, okay?
All right, so the casual observer thinks, how can you not know I'm a paper boy? And to the person that's protecting their home is like, how can I know that you're a paper boy? You're driving with your lights out. You're pulling into different driveways. The sheriff even made reference to something about garage door clicker. There are that it does happen with serial burglars at night. There's a remote that can open several different types of garage doors, and people go in and steal cars. There are also people that'll go in and unlock cars in the driveway, by the way, a huge problem here in Florida. And people go in the unlocked car, say they go into the unlocked Jeep in the driveway. They pull out the garage door opener. They open the garage. Now they've got free access to the house and to the garage. Generally, they don't want to alarm anybody in the house because they don't want to get caught. But it also gives them, the other thing that people do is they leave their key fob in the car, so you can just get in and start it, or they leave the key fob of the car that's parked next to them in the driveway in the other car. So you go in there, you open the Ford and you see a Chevy key fob. You look over and there's a Chevy in the driveway. Guess what? You got the key fob for it now, and they steal the car. So, I mean, none of this is like out of the ordinary. It is to an average citizen who's just like throwing newspapers for a living and who probably doesn't want to be out there at 2:30 in the morning, but he wasn't having it at first. At least he's starting to listen now. But as you can see, or as the story goes on, he definitely turns into a victim.
I think the guy's got a chip on his shoulder, hence the confrontation to begin with, getting out of his car and confronting this guy. So, I think he's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, but I guess I want to commend that officer with doing a great job with de-escalating him, because the he's at a 10 to start with, and then you can hear him. He tells his story over and over again. And every time he cycles, he kind of calms down a little bit, gives him a chance to vent. And then finally, the guy is regaining a psychological equilibrium, and the officer is able to say, I think this is a big misunderstanding. And you can move to the point where you say, you want to be understood. He wants to be understood. But ultimately, what I don't see is, although this is a misunderstanding, and this guy is the emotion that he's probably feeling biggest right now is embarrassment that there's all these police officers surrounding him. I don't know how this equates to $5 million in damages. I don't understand that. I don't understand how the other end of this engagement, the sheriff at one point was facing $100,000 worth of bond because this guy was in a danger from the sheriff.
The trial judge actually was involved in a hearing, which I'm going to show you in a second. Judge, it was a female. She excoriated. She just went nuts on the sheriff. He was appearing by Zoom. And apparently some surveillance was established on this guy to, get some dirt on him. He felt that he was being harassed. He makes this big complaint to the prosecutors because the sheriff is already under, the charges or whatever. He makes this complaint to the prosecutors. Prosecutors call for a bond. And this judge goes crazy on him, saying, you should know better. And, obviously he's threatened by you. And, it's never the other way around. Like the bad guys don't ever kill cops. So cops always kill bad guys. So this is the trial judge here, though. And this is a very heated exchange between the defense attorneys and the judge. And I was kind of impressed with the defense attorneys on this one.
Court trusts Mr. Troyer to not violate any court orders.
That question was at the center of a hearing involving Pierce County Sheriff Ed Troyer in Pierce County Superior Court. Troyer was back in court today to hear a motion to revoke his conditions of release. You may remember the state attorney general's office had charged Troyer with 2 misdemeanors, including falsifying a report, after an altercation with newspaper carrier Cedric Altimer last year. That's when Troyer called 911 saying his life was in danger, but then recanted.
And he knows who I am, and he threatened to kill me.
As part of that case, Troyer was ordered not to contact Altimer. But in today's hearing, the judge said an alleged interaction with Altimer in April was part of a pattern of intimidation. The judge commented that Troyer's position in the sheriff's department makes him one of the most powerful people in Pierce County. Given Troyer's past behavior, the judge contemplated how safe Altimer could be from Sheriff Troyer.
Mr. Troyer's decision to repeatedly violate this court's conditions of release and to unlawfully harass Mr. Altimer present what the court sees as a high potential for lethality. Mr. Altimer may not be safe given the record presented in this court.
Towards the end of the hearing, Troyer was almost put in handcuffs. The judge ordered that Troyer be taken into custody until he posted bail of $100,000. Troyer's attorney argued that putting Troyer into custody was nothing short of humiliation and demanded that Troyer gets time to post bail.
It's not about the $100,000 because if that's all it was, posting it satisfies the court's concern. What you're looking to do is a perp walk. That's what you're attempting to do here. And there's no place in the judicial system for that. That is what you are looking to do. You're looking to humiliate him, and there's nothing in the court rules or case law that says that's appropriate.
So that was a clip from King 5 News. We're just using that for educational purposes. But the judge was pissed and felt that the sheriff was using his powers to intimidate and ironically was going to have him carried away in handcuffs and make him post $100,000 bail, which is a form of intimidation, is it not?
Well, he just got out there and said that the elected official, the sheriff, just said that basically if Cedric's not safe from him, who is safe? I guess the sheriff is someone that's going to go after people and harass them or assault them or what? Like the judge just basically came out and said we have no confidence in him as a law-abiding citizen, as a good person, or someone who's just not a threat to society. It's just an insane thing for a judge to say. I'm really impressed or appalled in all the worst ways that even got said. And that attorney that you saw and heard vehemently arguing against the perp walk and the huge amount of bond. Normally you don't see attorneys get that passionate in court. I don't know about your experience, Drew, but like everybody's pretty respectful every time I've ever been to court.
Yeah, I do see a comment here. Troyer shouldn't have violated the terms of the of his bond, and don't be dismissive, but was the term that he violated reasonable? Because that was the crux of the argument. That was the crux of this recent argument, and the court was just going to flex their muscle. It wasn't this judge that placed the condition. It was another judge that excoriated him. That she was mad because he didn't show up to court to begin with. Like, how dare he not show up? And when you get right down to it, it's okay for this newspaper carrier to look at this through a racial lens and scream from the mountaintops that he's being profiled. The minute the sheriff says this is a political hit job, this is anti-police, this is the same stuff that we've been dealing with, all of a sudden he's got to follow every single rule. I get that we are held to a higher standard. If you're following that standard and you still can't, you're still meeting all these roadblocks, there's an issue. There's a bigger issue at play. And I think that this was the weaponization of the criminal justice system. And spoiler alert, the sheriff was found not guilty on both counts. So
does it mean that a civil suit's not pending? Is that the $5 million suit that's still going on?
He filed a $5 million suit. I don't know at what point, but the sheriff is still the sheriff. And he did file the $5 million that he had to give up his paper route. So he can't go in the sheriff's neighborhood because it's too traumatizing.
Okay.
So, and again, another comment here is Troyer did lie about the threat to his life. It isn't fair to Altimer, but he didn't lie about that. He said exactly what the guy said to him. And in fact, he said, he threatened my life. So do I have the testimony of the sheriff in here somewhere? The sheriff himself testified in this trial, by the way. It's unusual for a defendant to testify, especially in cases like this. And what the sheriff said flat out was, he said he was going to take me out. I did not think that he was going to take me out to dinner. It's that simple. I mean, like, he wasn't worried about whether the guy was able to take him out. It's the fact that the guy said it, and he repeated what the guy said. So then that when it came down to that little detail in the report that the detective said, no, he said he wasn't threatened. Not true. He said it exactly how it was said. You heard it on the phone call. He said it there. That's where they say he lied. Just because the detective didn't write it in the report, well, he didn't feel threatened. He wrote it as, he said he was not threatened, which is an offensive versus defensive kind of thing.
Right.
That's where they get the criminal charge. That's what they were hanging their hats on. And that's what the jury disagreed with. And then the jury said not guilty.
You wouldn't think that, something like this would blow up to be so big, but I mean, there you go. I mean, $100,000 for 2 misdemeanor charges. That's something pretty egregious. It's easy to see all sides of this issue, but you got to remember that the sheriff's an elected official. He was pretty popular when he ran in 2020. I think that he won by a pretty big majority there in Pierce County. He's going up. He's eligible for election again in 2024 or later this year. I guess he would take office again in 2024 if he runs again. And so, the guy can't do his paper route. It's going to be hard to have sympathy for the sheriff, I guess, just because of who the sheriff is. But what about the sheriff's life? We had his wife up there testifying that she wants it all to end. What is it like when you're a public figure and you're just trying to keep your neighborhood safe and you check on a little suspicion and all of a sudden, you're threatened with by a judge of being a danger to society, having handcuffs thrown on you, $100,000 bail, and now this lawsuit seems to have just blown completely out of proportion on all sides.
Obviously, we're all split on this. I think what's kind of clear is this. Everybody can scream racism anytime they want. Everybody can scream that there's a thin blue line and we stick up for each other and we protect each other and we cover for each other anytime you want. You can say that all that you want. You just heard a detective on the stand ridicule the sitting sheriff of the county where he works in a municipality. I don't want to hear anything about thin blue line being the veil that we all operate in the cloak that we use to cover for one another. That's a bunch of bullshit.
He's facing, trying to consider re-election. He's got this $5 million suit. I guess I just don't see where the $5 million comes from. Yeah, this guy was embarrassed. You could say that, that it was an over response. But again, a dispatcher thought a police officer was in danger. I think that's the only reason why the police showed up. I think they treated him very kindly. I think that they were professional to him. They explained look, the sheriff's not our boss. We're here to find out what was going on. And ultimately, they let Cedric tell his side of the story. And what ended up happening? They let Cedric leave the scene so he could go back to to work, which is super important to him. And he comes back to the sheriff's house later and continues to antagonize it. You could say whatever you want about Cedric. You can also say that he's not very smart because he didn't play the situation with the cop smart. If he had just said, whoa, I'm scared of that guy and I'm a newspaper man, and not been so confrontational, probably would have been out of there a lot faster. And if he had never come back to the sheriff's house later to throw that newspaper at his house, I bet a lot of the stuff that happened afterwards wouldn't have happened either.
That's why I say that's an important detail. I mean, they're dismissive of it, and they're kind of calling it like, oh, what a wuss. The guy came back and threw a newspaper. Ooh, big deal. That's a big deal. That shows the pattern, and the guy never got charged. The sheriff did. The news coverage of this, you will see that Cedric is in a pool of tears every time the camera is on him, and he's saying, I could have been shot that night. I could have died that night. He's not acting like somebody who was scared to death as a victim. He was on the offensive. I do believe that there was some type of fight or flight response that had kicked in, but he wasn't worried about being shot.
Well, case in point, too, it went to a jury. The jury got to decide, and sheriff was acquitted. So, I mean, we had due process. You could kind of like scoff at that or be cynical about that, but folks, that's the best we got. We gave it to a panel of jurors, and they saw more evidence than probably what the news media has. They looked at it all. They listened to everything that you just saw and lots more, I'm sure. And that's the conclusion they came to, is that the sheriff was within the rights of his duties to pull this car over, and that, that he didn't do anything wrong. There was no false report or whatever these other misdemeanors were. And I almost wonder, he's trying to keep his political career alive, but what's the recourse for excessive bail? I mean, it almost seems like there's a lawsuit there.
Yeah, well, that goes to the broader issue too, that I keep saying, like, we want criminal justice reform, and we want bail reform, and we want no cash bail. Unless it's a cop, because we want $100,000 bond. They're a threat to society. We're going to throw them in jail for 21 years for their first offense ever, because they're the most dangerous thing. You know what I mean? It is a double standard. If you're not going to treat this as a law enforcement officer who committed what you're now deeming as a crime in the process of working, basically, how are you going to treat them differently when it comes to sentencing or bond? What is their danger to society? Up until that point, they were law enforcement officers. They were protectors of society. So I think there's a lot to be discussed there.
If you're listening to this podcast later, call 848-CALM-911. Leave us a voicemail. Keep it under 2 minutes. We'll play it on the show. And if you've got a good point to make, or even if you just want to be heard, we'll play it here next week for you to talk about. It's certainly an interesting case with lots of different viewpoints. And I love stuff that's not clear cut. I love stuff where you can have both sides right and both sides wrong.
This is a great example, in my opinion, of the weaponization of the criminal justice system. This is to send a message against racism. The racism was manufactured in this situation.
Yeah.
There is no indication whatsoever that the sheriff used race as a means to either profile or harass this guy. In fact, this wasn't even harassment. You have a right as a taxpayer, let alone as a deputy sheriff, or as the sheriff, not a deputy sheriff. You have the right to find out what's going on in your neighborhood at 2 a.m.
He has more than a right. He has an affirmative responsibility. The sheriff cannot see like, well, I have reasonable suspicion to believe that there's a crime going on. I'm going to go to bed. The sheriff has an affirmative responsibility to, as an elected official, to go take care of that crime. That's what he's there for. He would have been negligent in his duties to just say, oh, well, whatever. You can argue he could have called it in differently. He could have called it in as a citizen. He should have had maybe PD do an extra patrol through the area. But ultimately, he's a cop and he can go take care of those things. And that's completely within his purview.
One final word. I don't care if the guy is an asshole. I don't care if the paper carrier is an asshole. There's a reason that Lady Justice behind me here is wearing a blindfold, because justice is blind. It doesn't matter their demeanor. It doesn't matter any of this. And you get your day in court. But you kind of have to commit the crime to get a day in court. And nobody accused the paper carrier of a crime. Somehow, when the sheriff, who should be entitled to call for help like any other citizen and any other taxpayer in that county, he's somehow committed a crime. I think you're sending the wrong message to people who, if we see something, say something. Yeah. Go ahead and call, but we're going to charge you with a misdemeanor as soon as we can.
Change the situation so he's not a sheriff. Let's say he's a concerned citizen whose their zeal maybe exceeds their reason. Okay, they're doing something dumb, but they want to go get the license plate, so they're driving after the car to try to get the license plate. Which, as a dispatcher, you would tell them, really don't do that. Suppose it had been a private citizen who had gone out there. I just wonder if it would be, obviously not escalating to a $5 million lawsuit because you can't get blood from a stone, but he knows that the sheriff who runs for election probably has some money that he can get in a lawsuit. So there you go. Swap out the situation with your common person and tell me that the common person, or the $100,000 because he's such a powerful person. But is that excessive bond for a common person trying to get a license plate? How about 25,000? Like, how far did you have to take that down before it was obvious that there was no weaponization of that bond process against whoever that other person against Cedric could have been other than the sheriff? So it's completely obvious that it's because he's the sheriff.
All of these turn into podcasts. I would love if you told 6 people to download the podcast version of any of these shows. Until next time, thank you for being you. And thank you, John.
Stick around.